Does anybody wish to address the council? Go ahead, Matt.
Matt Cole, 365 Cedar Street. Several months ago, put a request in for a stop sign at 4th and Cedar. I just wondering if there was an update on that happening.
Do we have any?
I've looked at it several times. Our traffic warrants that we have don't warrant a stop sign at that intersection. You know, it's not saying we can't put one up. It's a choice that you guys could make to put one there. We'd have to turn it into essentially a three-way stop. You know, it's only got two directions, but essentially we need to make it a three-way. One thing we are looking at though is this spring we're looking at hard piping that ditch along 4th Avenue. And part of that project, we're going to repair some drainage issues there, and we're going to add a concrete pan at that intersection, which I believe would be used to slow down traffic as well. I think that's more of the issue than, you know, it's just controlling the traffic, slowing it down a little bit, right, Matt? Through there.
Between that and the amount of kids in the park over there.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say with the amount of kids going to the park now that we've got the park up and running.
That corner's always been a issue for speed, but also for visibility. You get a car coming each direction, it cuts the corner.
Right. And like I said, it's something I've spoken with our engineers about it. Like I said, it really doesn't meet our factual warrants for stop sign, but it's something we could do. It's, you know.
Can we do it before we have to meet those warrants?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't we just do it since we have the.
I mean, we
park there?
can. That's not an issue.
Do we do speed bumps?
No.
Those don't
No.
slow people down. Look at our dip on Cherry.
That and there are nightmare for snowplows. So, I mean, if you guys have no issue with it, I mean, we can move ahead and get one in probably by the end
I'd
of the
rather
week.
see one put in there than.
We would probably put one on Cedar and one on 4th.
Make it
so
a three-way stop.
Yeah, there's not really a three-way, you know, it goes onto a field into the alley, but we'd at least do those two sides and make it a two-way stop instead of a free-for-all through there.
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, we will go out and look at it and mark it out and get locates. Worst case, probably a week to get it in.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anything else, Matt? Anybody else wishing to address the council? Okay, item number 1, swearing in of David Lawley, Patrol Sergeant.
solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Colorado, the Charter and ordinances of the Town of Hunter, and will faithfully perform the duties of sergeant.
I just gotta pin it on there good.
Congratulations.
All right, consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions on the consent agenda? No? If not, then I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda. I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Stadler,
Yes.
Councilmember Nolf?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Maestas?
Yes.
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammack?
Yes.
Mayor Hargis.
Yes. Item number 3, water bill decision, sorry. Last meeting, we had a public hearing on a water bill concern. We need to close that out. What would you guys like to do?
I'm gonna say, since there's no real proof, since he doesn't own the house and he has tenants in there, that it should just go ahead and be paid for, because there was no proof of a leak that the town could find. He's got tenants in there, so, I mean, I don't know. It could be he said, she said, and they did run the water longer. They just don't want to pay, you know? So I would say that just because there was no proof of a leak and it wasn't a one-time thing, that it should just be paid for.
I agree.
I do too.
Then I would entertain a motion on that.
I make a motion on the water bill decision to be paid in full. I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Stadler?
Yes.
Councilmember Nolf?
Yes.
Councilmember Maestas? Councilmember Hammack?
Yes.
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Mayor Hargis.
Yes. All right. Item number 4, discussion future of Hudson water supply.
Thank you. This has been a project that has been going on about a year and a half now in town. Before I continue, I'd like to say that you do have your consultants and attorneys here for any questions that you guys might have. So we have Steve Nguyen, Dan Brown, Jen Woods, town planner, and of course Corey. Here to answer any of your questions. Pop in when they feel it's relevant. So as I was saying, this has been a discussion that's been going on for a little while. Last year, council approved setting aside money annually to begin the process of purchasing water as it comes available. This won't generally be through Northern. Northern has a cap on the water that we can receive from them. There are possibly other options to go to. As well, the town made a decision to finance a municipal water efficiency plan, and that should be completed by end of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter this year. Having that plan outlines in specifics what the goals of this town are for conservation. As well, it allows you to access grants from the state to purchase water. We would obviously have to use, loans. We'd obviously have to use loans to purchase water if we're looking at, for instance, purchasing $1 million of water. But the idea being is if you can stretch that out over, let's say, 20 years, the value of the asset should be more than the value of the interest rates that you use to acquire the asset. So if you're looking at a 2.5% interest rate or 3% interest rate on a loan, but your water, as we know, is going from 45,000 a unit to 65,000 a unit every 18 months, and it's a finite resource, the value of your asset should go up faster than the loan. We've had a lot of conversations at the staff level about what comes next. And we've boiled it down to 3 questions that we want to bring to you and begin a conversation. We don't think this conversation will end tonight, but we hope it kicks off tonight. All that staff asks is that at some point in time, whether it's tonight or a month from now or 6 months from now or whenever the timeline goes, is that we get consensus from this council on the 3 questions so that we can move forward and bring back to you policy options after that time. So the 3 questions are, the overarching question, and it's question number 1, is the town willing to blend mountain water with local water supplies? That is a crux question. Right now, you get your water from the mountains. You use the local water to, if you take more than you need, you send it downstream, right? You're supplementing whatever goes downstream. Augmenting, I'm sorry, is the correct term. If you want to stay with mountain water, that's fine. It's high quality, but it is expensive, okay? But if you decide maybe you want to blend water with your local supplies, then you have a lot of costs that you may be looking for infrastructure. Reverse osmosis plants, pipes, pumps, all those things that you need to produce water are stuff that we would have to engineer, design, build, maintain, service, and execute as time passes. So that is a huge question, as you can see the implications of just that one question. That question can drive a lot of the other questions, whatever answer we get back from that. The second question is, currently the town requires dedication of water at annexation. You annex in, you have to come with water or cash in lieu for water, okay? Is council open to recalibrating when water is due to perhaps later in the development process, for example, at final plat? You'll see in the accompanying report that Jen did, some towns have dedication to final plat, some towns have at annexation when you dedicate your water or you give cash in lieu for water. From a developer point of view, that's a big deal. Annexation is a very speculative part. So if you're demanding somebody come in with, let's say, 60 or 100 units of water, they've got to have that right there at annexation. They're not sure where their development may go after that. On the other hand, from the town's point of view, that is the safest, most secure way to ensure that you have water. That's why some towns do it at annexation. Some towns do it at, for instance, final plat. So that's a question that we want to pose to you as well. And we have some developers online or some of their representatives, and you will hear from their side as to why that's a fundamental question. And then the last question is, would the town like to codify at some level guidelines for developers to use water-saving concepts to reduce their total water demand for purposes of dedication of water? So what that means right now is, right now if you come in with, you just have to, here's our use, and here's what it calculates to in units, and this is what we're paying, right? Whatever the cash in lieu is, or whatever the water they're bringing and dedicating to the town right now. We've had developers inquire about, can they do methods to reduce use so that they don't have to come in with all that water at that time. They're projecting they're going to use less, so therefore their demand should be less, so therefore their cash in lieu or their dedication should be less. Some towns do that, some towns don't. From a staff level, it creates some very interesting problems. For instance, let's say they all agreed to use low flow toilets and low flow sinks and zero-scape. But over the course of time, people realize that they don't have enough water pressure to wash their hair or clean their dog or whatever. So they take out the low flow stuff and they put in regular stuff. So how do we as a staff 5-10 years down the road monitor that? So there's some issues like that, but then other communities do this as well. And from the developer point of view, the less they can spend on water, the more profit they get or the more money they can spend somewhere else. So we hear that from developers. At staff level, we see pros and cons to it, but that's definitely a policy decision. So as you can see at all three levels, in all three questions, you can kind of see how it's going to frame what policies we would bring to you in the future to reach your goals. I think what I will do real quick, I've said my piece. I think I'm going to have some of the consultants offer their words, and then I think we would open it up to discussion or question and answer and get the discussion going that way. I'll start with Steve. Steve, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the memo or just in general on the topic?
Yeah, just some overarching sort of general thoughts. I'd say, you know, the box elder alluvium is a plentiful and renewable water source that's in and around Hudson. So it's easy to access. The issue with the box elder alluvium is, you know, poor water quality. So it requires a higher treatment like RO. And, you know, water that you pump from that alluvium requires augmentation. Currently, the town's only source of augmentation water is Laramie Fox Hills, deep Denver Basin aquifer water. And, per the state, that is based on an allocation, based on a 100-year life. So, in theory, if you go down this road of pumping alluvial groundwater, you are augmenting with the finite source when you're supplying water to a development that will be there forever. So, something to keep in mind there. But with the access to the water, certainly worth considering what it means to potentially extend the life of your CBT supplies, maybe investigate what that would do from a taste and odor standpoint, and explore if it's tolerable. But ultimately, that's a town council decision. But wanted just to relay some of those overarching thoughts to you.
Next is Dan Brown. Dan is your water attorney. He seldom participates in these meetings, so it's good to have him. And any thoughts that he might have?
Yes, hi, good evening. Nice to meet you all electronically. I don't have a ton to add other than just to emphasize what Guy is saying is that you have a challenging water problem, and one that I think we've worked, Guy in particular and his staff have worked well to synthesize it, to get some direction in terms of how to solve this problem. Some input from the town council on these issues would help focus what we're doing as consultants to try to solve these challenges. So I'm interested in the feedback. I'm hopeful that I can provide input on some of these challenges, but I won't go on further right now.
Okay. Corey, is there anything you want to add from? You want to touch on annexation requirements?
The only thing I would add, and Guy asked about annexation requirements, when you annex property, you agree that you have the capacity to provide service. That's why the town currently requires dedication of water rights at annexation, is you bring your own water, and then the town can say, yes, we are able to serve you with the water you're bringing to town. The communities that kick the can down the road to final plat, you can certainly do that, and you would have to change your code to essentially identify to the world that you still have this obligation. We're not going to have the capacity to provide you water unless you provide your own water at a point later in time. The risk is that you could annex property. Someone could then decide they can't afford to develop in town, and then you're kind of stuck because there may be other infrastructure that was built to serve it other than water and sewer. And if you can't provide water, they may want to disconnect and then go to larger lots that they can drill wells for. So that's sort of the hypothetical risk to annexing without water rights dedication. But having said that, if you all believe that that is a significant impediment to development, it is common practice to kick the can down the road and wait till final plat. It just comes with a different set of problems.
Okay. Jen, is there anything you want to? Okay. So with that, what questions do you guys have? We'll go around any questions or on question number one, is the town willing to blend? And again, we're not expecting direction tonight, but we want to offer you guys the opportunity to ask questions, get your hands around this topic, discuss amongst yourselves. Anybody have any questions on the
What's
first
the
one?
quality of the Laramie Fox Hills water?
Steve? Not great.
I'd say it's pretty similar, at least what I'm not a water quality expert, but from the reports that I've seen, I'd say it's similar to the Box Elder alluvial water.
It's not the greatest quality. It would take
Isn't
work.
that what Keithburg's need?
Yes.
Okay.
They need like water softener, so I wouldn't want to blend at all.
Yeah,
'cause our
I-
water's pretty good.
If we can help it, I'd rather not.
I agree.
Another question I have probably for Dan or maybe Corey. What's the smallest lot size now that the county will allow wells to be put in? Doesn't it have to be fairly large?
I thought it was 2.5 acres, but I'm not sure.
That I would not know off the top of my head.
I'm not sure of that from a land use standpoint, actually. I do know what the state engineer's requirements related to that, but they wouldn't be a constraint here.
Well, and the other thing is, it's going to depend on whether it's a subdivision and whether it's water and sewer and whether they're on public sewer. So there's a lot of moving parts. And so I think I'm not sure it's a hard and fast answer because they're not allowing smaller lots to have septic systems. You may have public sewer and that impacts the water as well.
I have one thing I might offer on this topic, if it's all right, just to help aid the discussion. Is it okay if I jump in?
Go ahead.
In 2012, I got a decree, my firm got a decree for Hudson for just this. I think it results in some blending, but it's an augmentation plan to allow some alluvial wells to pump and supply water. And the augmentation source is deep Laramie Fox Hills water. So that's a specific example, I think, of what would be that would be the kind of thing that would be involved in a blended water supply. So that example might help provide some information or a jumping off point for this discussion.
Does anybody else have any other comments on the blended?
I don't know if it relates to blended, but do we have like a 10, 15, 20, 25 years plan for water, or is that what we're trying to develop? Because the reason I ask is a lot of these other communities use reservoirs and ponds and things of that nature. Have we even looked into that? Is that in our scope at all, or?
So when we get answers to these questions, then we would come back and bring those types of concepts to you. So for instance, if you said, yeah, blending is something we'd look at, then we'd have to come back to you and go, okay, this is how much an RO plant may be. This is the pumps. This is, we may have to have a reservoir. That's what this looks like. If you say, no, we want mountain water, then that issue goes away. And we would stay with the same infrastructure that we have now, save for maybe adding a skid at the Fort Lupton plant. We own 1/6, I believe, of the Fort Lupton plant. And so, if we were to increase our capacity, we would add a skid there, but then we'd also have the size of the pipe, the distribution pipe that comes here. So each way to get more capacity, you are going to have some issues. But if you said, yeah, we want to blend, then that would put us down trying to get you guys a thumbnail of how much that infrastructure would cost and what it would involve. And it may be reservoir being tanks, open, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess the second question I would have, it may be better for Steve to answer, is given the current Colorado water situation with water units being highly unavailable, it seems, if we assume the same growth rate we've had over the past, 5 years, what's the end state, right? Like, how long can we hold out on not blending water?
The last calculations that I don't have them off the top of my head, but you're essentially at a break even. If you strip out what the town got from the correction facility, you're essentially at a break even now, I think at a 60% CBT quota.
So essentially that means if we have any more development, we have to require more water. what's the likelihood we'll be able to do that in the next 3 to 5 years, given the availability?
A great question. So there's two ways to kind of work that. One is we would try to purchase water, and that's where we've headed. We set aside $100,000 this year, the water plan, all that stuff, to try to make it so we can acquire water. And we would just kind of bank it. And if developers came, then they would basically pay us for that and water. Or they have to have it. So you're not going to need it for probably anything that's already in town because it's already annexed and that should have been dealt with. But you're not going to see 50 houses going up in the old neighborhood. You may see a one-off or 2 houses, right? This really affects you with annexation. And with annexation, that's a whole new ballgame because right now, like, at annexation, they have to have the water.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my greatest concern is that we get to a point, which we're pretty much at now, that there's just no water to buy.
There's water to buy, it's extraordinarily expensive.
Then we overdevelop and we're left like out of water, overdeveloped, and with no other choice. I'd prefer to plan ahead of time so that we don't have that issue.
Is there, kind of piggybacking off of what Dan said, is there something comparable to our water now that we can look into blending so it's not like the Box Elder one that we have to blend with, or, like water that's not comparable to our water, like a reservoir or something?
Are you talking the Windy Gap and the NIST?
Yeah.
So are you like asking if we blended water, what it would taste like, what the quality would be?
I just don't want, super hard water like Keensburg has and not good quality water. We already have good quality water. I don't want to really go away from that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if there's something we could blend with that is comparable to our water.
To kind of get you a sample of what it
Yeah.
Steve, your thoughts? I don't know how we would do that. I think we could sample, water from around the area. It'd be really hard to. Keensburg, I think, is a little different area geographically. What's happening underneath the ground. Not different, but there's something happening.
I just don't want to blend and have our water quality just go down the drain, and then everybody's unhappy and just.
I will say that reverse osmosis technology is getting better daily. It is also the most expensive possible way to treat water. And sometimes there's a loss of up to 20% of the treatment process. So you are losing, and it's hard to compensate that back. But it does create tasty water. I mean, it gets a lot of stuff out, but it's a hard process and it's an expensive process. And it would be something that we would have to spend a lot of money in infrastructure. The most expensive widgets, the first widget, because you have to build a factory around it. So that's kind of what you'd be looking at here is your first, most expensive drop's your first one. We have to build an infrastructure around it to get that water out. Quality would be hard to come up with examples. Steve, you got something? Let me know.
I can jump in here real quick. The town's already set up with RO treatment. So keep that in mind. You would likely have to expand that treatment over time, but you're already set up to do so. I'm not a water quality expert, like I said, but I imagine, what I've heard with RO treatment, other than what, the loss of 25-30% of the water in brine, but the RO takes almost so much out of the water that it doesn't taste like anything. So a lot of folks that are on that, what I understand is they almost add salts and minerals back in to that water because it's cleaned up so well. So my hunch is if there is blending of treated CBT water into RO treated water, that there is a level that would be tolerable and consistent with what the town's used to.
Okay, thank you.
I think something else of note that just kind of popped into my head, even if we chose to blend, you're looking at what, 5 to 10 years to build infrastructure?
Well,
and then even then, you'd have to allow further development to even come up with the tax revenue to afford that infrastructure to begin with.
or impact fees or something like that. But yeah, it would be a lot of counting pennies to make it work. Like you said, we do have an RO plant right now. We would have to scale it. It's not, I think, the size to serve everybody if we shut off mountain water and with that, but we would be looking at blending the two sources. So yeah, we would be cognizant of being able to scale it, and then everything that went in subsurface for pipes and pumps and all that stuff around the town.
Do we know what a system would, RO system would look like? Let's say if the town was double in size, what the cost of that infrastructure would be?
I don't think I have an idea. Yeah, that'd be a hard one to.
Because I mean, if that's more expensive than purchasing the water, I think that kind of gives you kind of an approach.
Well, and then we still have some capacity issues coming from Fort Lupton. We're not hurting awful, but if we do continue with mountain water, there may have to be something with the pipes. I don't know. Hey, come on up, Jonas. That may be putting another pipe next to it in the ground. That may be oversizing the current pipe. I'm not sure.
So we've actually discussed this for many years on what we need to do to upgrade our CBP system from Fort Lupton. Currently, one skid, which gallons a day. Through our pipeline, we can flow that just fine. I believe just the math on it, we can flow up to 750,000 gallons on a gravity pipeline that we have in place. If we were to double treatment capacity, we'd probably look at putting in a booster station to pump it into town, which I believe gets us around 1.2, 1.3 million gallons a day in the existing pipeline. So it would more than double our flow into
And
town.
that pipeline, assuming that that pipeline's big enough to handle that.
Yeah, it's
flow rate.
designed. When they installed the pipeline, they had those things in the back of their head and set it up so we could add booster pumps if need be. And to kind of touch more back on the blending, we do currently blend some water during the summer months. I can tell you, many of the citizens know we do. They know as soon as we turn that RO on. And as Steve was saying, we do actually add some of the untreated water back in because RO is so pure. There's nothing left in it. So we blend a small percentage back in. Our system that we have is rather old, is installed in the 90s. So we're closer to the 30% waste off of it right now. So every 100 gallons that comes in, we throw 30 down into the sewer.
Anybody have any other questions on that topic?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Let's just say the prison did open up again, or I don't know, something can happen. They start using up all that water. How are we sitting then?
We would, so I think they have enough water to service themselves. So I think we'd be okay. Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The only thing I think we have some worries about what they send downstream into our sewer system. Sometimes it gets a little gelatinous and chunky. We would want them to do some sort of catch basin or a screen.
Well, they actually have that now.
I guess we still get globbies, but
It's kind of interesting the stuff they catch out of there. Operation, but
not even in the worst recesses of my imagination do I want to know. But I think if they came back online, they would have the water to feed them, but we'd still be right at margin.
Okay.
Steve, am I accurate on that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, how about the second point? Water dedication and annexation or by final plat?
I'm
Annexation.
gonna say annexation, because if we say final plat and something happens and they can't buy water or get water, then yeah, I just would like to keep it at annexation. It just saves us, I think.
I think the catch 22 you got to be aware of with that though is we can't afford to buy water or blend or do any of this osmosis plant if we don't have further development.
Yeah, but
And-
we can't buy water. Who's to say the developers are gonna be able to buy water either?
That's true.
So
And
then we're just
currently,
gonna have-
many of the developers won't come in because water is due
Right.
at annexation.
Yeah, but the thing is, if we can't buy water as a town, I doubt they're gonna be able to find water to buy either. And they're just gonna wanna come in and develop and then hope they can get water in like 5 years or 3 years. And then if they don't have water,
They can't develop unless they bring in water, but
Can you define final plat for us? So we know what part of the development that actually is?
Yeah, so from a linear, going linear, goes annexation, zoning, and then platting. So
The
you,
platting is before houses are even built.
oh, yeah.
absolutely,
Okay.
you
Oh, yeah.
cannot have a building permit. You can't sell a lot
without.
until it's platted. So let me just, to complicate things, put this conversation into sort of a larger policy perspective. I think if you look at the municipalities, and this is a generalization, not going to be at one size fits all, but I think this is a fair generalization. Those that do not require water at annexation are much more interested in growth. It is an incentive for those communities that want to grow to defer the water rights discussion. You know, and I'm not a planner, but part of the discussion is what the town ultimately wants to be when it grows up. Because if you want to encourage rooftops, which in turn likely will encourage more commercial, then those communities that do that tend to be more aggressive about deferring that water rights discussion. If, as a matter of policy, council's happy with less growth, maybe even no growth, depending on how water becomes more and more expensive, then absolutely annexation is the most conservative approach. People don't annex till they're ready, and it has less risk of future discussions about how to allocate water rights. But that's a broad generalization, but I don't think you can have the discussion about water in a vacuum without talking about your growth policy as a whole.
And it looks like all the towns that were given to us in the report all say residential is required prior to recording final plat.
For
So,
examples of those who do it, there's plenty of towns that we did put in the report that do it at annexation. Corey works largely, if I understand, with towns that do it at annexation.
so the ones in the report are Dacono, Erie, Firestone, Frederick, and Fort Lupton.
And think about the growth planning. I mean, think about the growth management and growth planning of those communities and compare it to us.
I would rather just stick with the annexation, but that's me.
I agree.
I think I'd like to get more citizen input on it before making a decision
Definitely.
Yep. I
on
think
whether
that's
they
a
want
big part of it.
to grow. Because I mean, we're constantly hearing, we want a rec center. We want these other items. You can't afford those other items without growth. They want a shopping center. You can't have a grocery store if you don't have 5,000 people visiting it every day. So.
And I've been at the table with developers who, when we get to water, we say to do an annexation, they just say, we can't do it, and get up and walk away. And that's fine. That's their choice. You're in an interesting position as a town because you have revenue that is not directly tied to rooftops or sales tax. You do get a chunk of money from the Excel power plant. That should be fairly stable. The extra revenue we saw this year from oil and gas will taper off considerably, but it gave you a nice little booster shot. So you're not absolutely I love developers. Boy, they love this town. They just want to help us so much. I love them. They come in and say, well, we can help you grow. And we're able to say to them right now, we do have revenue that we can use for things that this town wants that don't come from development. So you are in an interesting position right there that I don't think a lot of towns, especially they're in that report, have that similar situation. But you won't have that situation. You'll have Excel for a long time. Oil and gas will probably start to peter out because it just does. The well starts producing less and everything like that. But for right now, you're not hurting, you're not financially trying to chase rooftops. So it really does give you a little bit of a cushion to decide where are we and where do we want to go.
Okay, and the third one. Guidelines for developers to use water saving concepts.
So just to kind of touch on this, what we would be looking at is something that would go in your code that would kind of give guardrails to developers about what we would think would be acceptable for proving that they would use less water. And that can take a variety of forms. We didn't really get neck deep in that. We kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. We don't want to be bolder, but it is something that we've heard from developers. What if we did this? Would that calculate for less water? And instead of doing it on a case-by-case basis, we thought perhaps adding something in code that kind of gave, stay within these parameters might help developers come to us with a little more established thoughts than just, hey, what do you think about this? So that's the reason we're asking the question.
I guess the question I have there is, would this include a non-potable water system for irrigation as an option?
Yes, and that actually is already a standard in our public works standards. We just don't have any sources. So for instance, Mr. Land, you just had an agreement go before you about a non-potable line that goes across our property. That's an example of somebody out in our town who's using a non-potable resource right now and using it for irrigation purposes. Not for residential, but for agricultural uses, but still using it. And that's how we permitted it through our code.
Because I'll be honest with you, that's my biggest expense. My water quadruples in the summer just because of irrigation.
And keep in mind, irrigation is kind of a two-pronged approach. You're watering plants, but the plants themselves eat the water. So we're not just talking about using a non-potable source to just water the plants, but maybe we're thinking about the type of plants that go in the dirt and how much water they take as well. So xeriscaping is the term. It's not zero. So you still have plants whenever you do xeriscaping, and there's an art to it. And actually, it was coined here in the state. Denver Water was the one who created xeriscaping. So there's a standard specified approach to planting when you're using a resource like a non-potable resource.
Well, because we are a desert.
Arid is Colorado's middle name. Yes.
Yes.
That is true.
And it truly surprises me still that developers, when they actually put in a lawn, are still putting in Kentucky bluegrass because that takes the most water of all of them. My biggest issue on something like that, in allowing a developer to put in non-potable for the outside water use, even with xeriscape, 5-10 years down the road, a homeowner can say, I want lawn. And how do we keep them from, first of all, switching over from the non-potable to the potable water to water that lawn? Or, how do we keep them from doing that? Because 5-10 years down the road, it's like Guy was saying with low flow fixtures within the house. That I'm not as worried about because you're not going to be able to buy the regular flow fixtures anymore. Right? If you're a contractor who does, taking down old houses and you pull something out and you want to put it in yours, but you can't buy them new anywhere. The landscaping, though, and the non-potable, that could be an issue.
And I will say, this isn't the first community to grapple with what are good standards for, good landscaping practices. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at other jurisdictions and the problems they faced and the realities and how they dealt with those issues. So for instance, just thinking off the top of my head, one way that issue has kind of come to head, which is how do you make people down the line, honor the plans and kind of the agreements that were done at the beginning? Well, one way is to not let them be responsible for it. So say the irrigation system that serves the community property is a community irrigation system. So your outdoor water resource is not in your control. So therefore it can be controlled a little bit better. And that's just one way. There are many different ways that communities have figured out a way to really make sure that people do what they say they're going to do for the long term. That's just one way, just one approach that I've heard jurisdictions take to try and make sure that the responsibility wasn't left in the hands of an owner 10 years down the line who didn't know what the plan was to begin with. There are ways, and we can bring you some different approaches if you're interested.
And I'd say I heavily lean towards providing options and incentives to xeriscape versus dictating xeriscaping.
I agree.
And I don't know if Dan Brown and Steve Wynn could talk to this, but potable, non-potable, xeriscaping is just one example. I mean, I know that there's a huge community in Douglas County that's being developed now called Sterling Ranch. And when it went through the planning process in Douglas County, part of the discussion was how many single-family equivalents per house, because normally it's one, right? And so they were trying to get it down to whether it's 0.75, and it wasn't just xeriscaping. It wasn't just potable, non-potable. It was all these smart water technologies built into the houses, capturing rainwater in some situations, as I understand it, a whole series of ways to require less water for single family equivalent. So, you know, there is, as I understand it, and this is well beyond my expertise, but a whole host of possible things you can look at that would reduce the amount of water that a single family equivalent, one house would use, that the developers could bring to you for evaluation. Because Douglas County spent literally years evaluating the water plans of the developer of Sterling Ranch.
Okay.
Steve, you have any thoughts on that, or Dan?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would agree with what Corey said there. In the end, though, for purpose of this discussion, I think it really boils down to what extent the town wants to take risks in all of these areas. Or maybe that's not the right word, but you can take less conservative approaches and you can be creative in the interest of promoting development, but it's really a risk allocation. And it's a reasonable risk allocation, but that's the direction we need overall is how willing are you to accept some additional risks to help out with the development here? I mean, for instance, the 0.5 CBT dedication requirement is very conservative in its own right. CBT normally yields more than that. So that you could just start right there in terms of, but there's a host of things we could look at where the code and the policies are set up to be conservative with the mindset that the town doesn't want to run out of water or have to take draconian steps when development's already in place. The discussion really is how much are you willing to accept a little bit more risk?
All right. Anything else on that?
How much research are we planning on putting into just this particular question?
As much as you.
What kind of time commitment are we looking at here?
So these will move at various speeds.
Yeah,
you know,
this could be a rabbit hole.
It absolutely could. We could get extraordinarily creative on question number 3. 1 and 2 are much more straightforward. You know, you say 1, we're willing to blend. We come back to you with some 50,000 foot views of what that may entail, like we're talking infrastructure, stuff like that. But for number 3, we could go full on crazy if you want us to. But we're trying to get a sense from you right now, if that's something that you'd like to look at and get it in your code at some level. The other option is we take them as they come. Everybody, if they have a better mousetrap, they can bring it to us.
Do we have a list of some of these items that maybe some developers have proposed that they do to lower their water requirement?
We get the pretty standard ones. We get the low hanging fruit ones. the low flows, the xeriscaping, the trying to find ways to do your non-potable. But then, let's look at a non-potable example of somebody, let's say, dragging water from outside of town to a development inside of town. Who owns that? Who maintains it? Who's paying for it? Who's in charge of the rights? There's a bunch of things that are going to go in with that one.
And listening to the discussion, listening to the discussion, one kind of low-hanging fruit option is to say that at annexation, you would consider the type of things we're talking about with lower water use. And then it's up to the developer at annexation to convince you, and you can decide not to annex for any reason at all. So you can put in your code section that you have that opportunity. They bring something to you and you have your consultants evaluate it to say, is this legitimate? Because it may just be a 50-acre parcel. And so the risk might be less. So there are ways to go part of the way and kick the can down the road, but keep your options open still, even with requiring the water at annexation.
I guess I've got another question for you. Is it worth discussing how this may, because I'm under the impression, and I could be wrong, in my little amount of experience, that a lot of these developments are being developed as special tax districts. Could some of this be part of that discussion? Like, that seems like a special tax district purpose right there. If I'm not mistaken, water is one of them, roads is another, and there's like 3 or 4 other requirements.
Yeah, in fact, if we ever got to that point where you were talking about potable versus non-potable and you did not want the town to be the operator of a non-potable system, I would recommend it be a metro district as opposed to an HOA, because a metro district is a governmental entity that you have a little more comfort that it's going to last as closer to in perpetuity than an HOA might. So it is certainly a function a metro district could do. Absolutely, there's a mill levy that comes with that, a significant one.
Maybe that's something to look into, requiring special tax districts for any new developments.
You guys planning on coming in with more pitchforks?
I'm already burned at the stake, man.
All right. Fair enough.
Do you need any more direction from us on this?
I would suggest taking some time and talk to, I think there are people who are listening to this. I think they can reach out to you, give them your opinion or their opinion, talk with some people. We can ask you in 2 weeks if you want to re-engage. They're complicated questions. They seem kind of simple on their face, but now as we get into it, you can kind of see how there's a lot of moving parts to these things. We got some feedback initially from the questions. I would suggest taking some time and hearing from constituents, developers, whoever, ping you on email. For everybody online, everybody sitting around the table, their email is available on online. Go to our website, hudsoncolorado.org. You can email me, I'll forward it to council, whatever. But I think having that dialogue with constituents and then coming back 2 weeks or a month, going through these again, and then trying to get some feedback from you. You may have a little more, we threw a lot at you tonight, so we may get a little more nuanced discussion, and then I think getting some direction from you, and then we can go from there. Ultimately, I'd like, for some of these bigger pieces, if they have budgetary ramifications, that we get it so that we can have that conversation and include it in the August budget discussion. But that would be the far reaches of the timeline.
Okay. Any other questions right now from the council?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Thank you to everybody who presented for this one.
Thank you.
Item number 5, presentation Hudson Snow Plow Policies and Procedures.
Just want to touch base with you guys tonight, kind of why and what we do when it snows in Hudson. I just handed you our most current snow plow route maps. I believe these are available online for those of you that are watching from home. In a typical storm, we plow one round trip, including primary and secondary roads, over 40 miles. That takes roughly 3.5 hours to 4 hours to make one round through there. We have policy, you do not exceed 35 mile an hour when plowing for safety reasons, and anything over 35 mile an hour, you don't do proper plowing. County Road 49 is a big one for us. You know, it's 4 miles to do it one time. County Road 51 is another big one for us. You know, we base this map, and this map's actually been carried on since before I started with the town. One thing you will notice if you look at all the primary routes, nobody has to travel more than 2 blocks to get to a plowed road. Essentially, when we're plowing, it's for emergency services. Make sure they can get in and out if they need to. That's why we don't plow every single road. I've also attached cost guides. You know, what does it cost the town for us to go out in an event? We do put out, you know, material. The material we use is $135 a ton. It's called Ice Slice. You can only get it out of one mine in Utah. It's the best product on the market, so we use it. There's no cleanup. When you use a salt sand mix, which is cheaper, you have to clean up the sand afterwards. So it kind of washes on cost. I believe the CDOT salt sand mix runs about $95 a ton. You know, I went through, looked up through the FEMA guide, cost of all of our equipment that we use. You know, a general storm, kind of like we had over the weekend, we're looking at the cost of the town is about $5,600 for us to put out a plow truck. That includes one guy for a 12-hour shift. We have 4 hours usually the day before to prep, you know, get the backhoe ready, get the truck ready, get everything filled. The day after is a big day for us. Snow plowing is extremely rough on equipment. We spend a full day just putting trucks back together. New cutting edges, washing, greasing, whatever else may break. You know, sometimes you hit a manhole and break stuff. Plows are mounted right to the frame of the truck, so everything you hit with a snow plow just travels through the entire truck. It's extremely rough on our equipment. So that's kind of, you know, the gist of what I'm talking with you guys about tonight. Why we do what we do. I feel we have a very good route map. I've gone over several other communities, and they are not near as intensive as we are in plowing. I can speak personally for the town of Keensburg. They don't put a plow out till it's done snowing. We actually watch cameras at our shop. We have a handicap spot, and if we can't see the painting on the ground, we dispatch our plows. We've also used the police officers. They'll call us out because we can't see ice on the camera. So they'll call us out. So that's kind of what I've got for you guys tonight and why we do what we do.
I have something.
Okay.
Can I ask why you only have 3 streets that are the bus route for Weld School District, not 4 of them? I have the current one. The transportation director emailed me today. Cherry is a main bus
It
route.
shouldn't be.
It is because they take Cherry from 52 down to Hudson to the bus loop, pull right in, and they go out
They're
Dayton.
not supposed to.
But that's
We
their
talked to
thing.
them when they built the school that they would
So,
use Beach
They don't,
over to Dayton.
because they
so-
can't get through on Beach because of all the parked cars.
Right.
So this is their bus route. I can email it to you.
I would
It's
be-
been their
yeah,
bus
please
route
send
for
it.
5 years since I've lived there. And
And it's
that's
not
why I don't
supposed to be,
understand
'cause
why Cherry's
That's
never
something
plowed.
we've discussed with them. I know they just recently had a change of transportation director.
So if I give the transportation director your contact info and I
You
email
bet.
you this, can
You
you have a
bet.
discussion with them as
You
and
bet.
to figure out if they are going to continue to use Cherry?
Yeah.
To plow that as
Because
a
I
bus
know
route?
Joe Racine had an agreement with them that they were to use Beach and Date Street.
I tell you
They
what,
never
since I've
have.
lived there.
It's
I know,
always been
we
Cherry.
always
No,
see them
that-
on there too.
It's always been.
Um,
So there's nothing that's ever changed.
Yeah,
Right.
That's been the
Since-
main bus route
Since
Right.
I've lived here, it's
since I've
been the
lived
bus
there.
route.
So, and the roads were dirt then.
Right. And yeah, that's, like I said, this map is something that has been in existence for,
Because I called them today when I asked and I talked to the transportation director, and he said that he has never told you guys that Cherry is not a bus route. They've always said Cherry is a bus route.
and like I said, I can only go off what was passed on from Joe Racine.
Okay, well, I'll forward you the email and I will have him get in contact with you
Yes,
to get that
definitely
all
do.
fixed and put that as a primary, because I think trying to get buses through on snowpacked is a safety hazard.
Right.
There's too
And-
much traffic on beach to have them go. the
Yeah,
buses
I was gonna
Right.
say it needs.
And it is.
Even today when I was coming back, one of the police officers raced.
Right. Well, you should try and take
car.
a snow plow down
Yeah.
Beach Street. We have 14-foot plows on our trucks.
So I
That
will
is another
agree with
reason
you
we don't
there.
go into the residential a lot, is you see how narrow our streets are. It's hard for us to put a truck down those.
Well, and then they get stuck because they can't turn
Right.
because the cars won't
Another
let 'em.
big issue we have with snow removal is helpful citizens that decide to help us out. Then we spend hours cleaning up after them. They've dumped snow in the alleyways, block sidewalks. So, we go out and clean that up as well. Part of our snowplow too is Olive Town Hall site, the assisted living or Prairie View. We do that. Sidewalks at all the parks, sidewalk from the school all the way up here, all the sidewalk here. Anything that's attached to a town-owned property, we do those sidewalks. So it's busy when it snows here.
No, I'm assuming this cost, you have it broken down 24-hour. I'm assuming that's a 4-inch snowfall, correct?
Yes, yes.
And if it was 8 inches, that cost would obviously.
On
grow
average,
kind of-
most snowstorms we get here can be handled in a 12-hour shift.
Okay.
We do get the occasional where, if we do get over 8 inches, we do send a smaller truck into the residential. We make one pass down the center. I found it's the most fair way. When you're in a residential area, everybody has a driveway. It's where do you put the snow? We don't have the equipment to remove the snow. I have a backhoe. That is my one thing with a bucket. And it's used to load material. So it's hard for me to have it out scooping snow when I've got trucks out trying to sand and salt.
Dan, one of the issues that we run into when I talk to him at budget time is we can get some other things for snow removal, right? But your events don't happen a ton. You're looking maybe 2 to 4 events a year.
Yeah.
It's not like the
It's not
mountains in
costly.
Vail where I lived, where it was every weekend.
Right.
And they were the world's best at moving snow. They had all the equipment, they had a place to drop it off, all those things. So we've had discussions at budget of, okay, do we spend it on something that would be more for snow or something that may get a lot more utility? And so
Yeah.
it gets a little funky when we're addressing snow.
Well, it looks like it's cheaper to use the snow blowers.
Right, right. Yeah, we'll just walk down, we'll buy some more snow blowers and everybody walk down the street. Of course, then we're breaking windows and stuff, throwing the snow out. So we actually try not to use the snow blower very often just because, I've seen what happens to hoses and extension cords and anything else laying in the way of them. We just actually today picked up our new UTV. The Gator is stepping down in its role. We picked up a Caterpillar UTV, much heavier duty. It's got a 6-foot plow on it. It'll actually keep up with traffic. So we're not going to be holding up traffic everywhere we go. It'll actually do 45 miles an hour. It's got more room in it. You've seen my crew. We are not the tiniest group of guys. 2 guys in the Gator is a full load. So we just picked it up today and it'll hopefully be going into service in the next week once we get the lights and everything put on it.
You keeping the Gator or selling?
We're going to keep it. It's going to become more just a parks unit for dragging ball fields and spreading seed and fertilizer, and it'll still have the plow attachment. So if we need it, we can get it out too. We found they actually work really well in the residential areas because they've only got a 6-foot plow and they're easy to turn around. We have tons of dead ends in this town, and they are a bear to snow plow, street sweep, everything. I hate dead ends almost as much as speed bumps.
So we can just put the Gator out on 52.
Just
between
pacing
town limit-
traffic.
Yeah, just back and forth.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
slow.
you bet. You can sign up, you can take first shift in it.
All right. Anything else for
I
Hunter?
just have one question. So these primary ones are the ones that you are always going to do. no
Those
matter
are the first ones we hit. So we always hit the secondaries too, but they're towards the end of the event. So we make sure the primaries are always open. Secondaries will come next. We have very few secondaries, so generally we just hit them with the primaries, Holly Street, Cook Court. We just knock them out because we're in the area. We also have a rule, if we're crossing or going down CDOT's road, we keep our plow down. And they do the same thing for us. So if they're on one of our roads, they'll plow for us. So we have a pretty good working relationship with them when it comes to storm. They actually called me Sunday asking if we needed any help, which I found hilarious because my guys were bailing those guys out. So, it's one of those, we have to travel that road. I don't see the reason to pick up the plow. We're already spending the money to drive down it. Let's help them out when we can. We are talking too with Weld County on acquiring some possible more roads. It's only going to add to this. It's going to be great because Weld County never plows them. So they'll actually get plowed. Right now, CDOT and we plow them. So if we're going to do it, we might as well get the user's tax off of it.
Now, if we could only get them to hit all of the end of Holly.
They're working on it. I've got a whole new crew. It's a lot of training this year.
I noticed you got a little closer to the mailbox this time, but
Right.
I had just cleared the entire driveway and in front of the mailbox and he came back down the street again. And this time there was more snow, so I had more to clear.
It's good exercise.
It was. It was good exercise. Any other questions for Hunter?
No, and I'll have
No.
Nate.
Yeah,
get in
definitely
contact.
have him get a hold of me.
Yeah, I'll go
Yeah.
bring him this tomorrow.
I've spoken with Stewart as well, the head of maintenance, about it.
Okay.
And he's told me that they're supposed to use those
How
routes.
much work would it be to actually just add it as a primary?
It's not a lot. It's,
Is it something we could just do?
I mean, I can do it.
Because I
That's
feel like they're
definitely-
not, even if they say they're going to use beach. they're
Right.
not.
No, we
They're
can,
never gonna
we
use
can
beach,
definitely
so-
add it, we'll,
I think, it's for safety, because you got,
right.
All the buses and then the
It's-
You got
parents all
buses and
use.
The
Sure.
plowing the
chairs.
road
If you
isn't the
start
big
pushing
part.
the buses
It's
down
how do
beach.
we stage it to hit it properly,
right.
without having to make, 6-block round trips to
Go through
to
their
go
bus
2
loop.
blocks. Oh. No, we've had that fight with the school district. We have a ongoing battle of who's piling snow where.
Oh, I know.
Well, I'm just worried that if you do push them to use the beach, it's just going to cause more issues.
They won't go to beach.
Well, even if they did though, then you're going to have people
Well, and
just going all random.
part of this
places.
agreement wasn't so much for snow removal.
Right,
Cherry Street was not designed for heavy traffic.
right.
So we're going to end up having to rip out that entire road and repave it in the very near future.
Right.
Oh,
Well, and
especially
beach
with-
is listed as, it's Beach, Fourth, and Date, and Cherry are what the school district uses for their bus
Right.
routes.
Right. And
And
that's
it's
why we
because
approached them
Take
to
the kids down this way,
not
down
use
Beach.
Cherry.
But they now use Cherry, which they've done since I've lived here because they pull them right into that bus loop.
Right.
So,
I mean, we can definitely add it. It's, I'm going to have to take some time and figure out routing and, everybody plows different too. So it's, our main concern, we always start with Cedar Street and Beach, unless it's very icy. Then 49. If it's a storm where we know school's getting canceled, we're a little later on hitting Beach in that area. We focus on 49 and
Right.
51.
which is understandable.
We've had storms where we do run 2 trucks overnight, 12-hour shifts. That's a lot of work. And it really throws us off the next day because we're short operators. Right now I've only got, counting myself, we have 4 CDL drivers. I've got 2 have got their permit.
Positions too.
I'm looking for a utility operator right
Okay.
now because I sent one of my public works guys to work in utilities. So it's
There's
throwing a
still
wrench in.
Extra space. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I can also look into the agreement that we had in 2018 with the planning of the school when we did that. To
Okay.
see why it would reroute it. 'cause it was
Yeah,
supposed to be-
I just, when I took over Public Works and they rebuilt the school here, Joe had talked to him, Cherry Street's, it's 4 inches asphalt. It's not designed for heavy. heavy
That's why
vehicles.
The planning. would be
And
like
you
that.
can see it not so much on your block, but the next block up,
Right.
it's already starting to fail there by Dan's house.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
You know, it'll just look at Fourth Avenue at
Yeah.
the school, you know, that's on our repair and replace list this year. You
And
know.
I'll send you what Nate sent me as their
Yeah,
bus route.
definitely.
I'll email it to you. So,
Yeah, get that to me.
yep, I will.
So, all right, any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Item 6A, Resolution 21-08, resolution approving a license agreement allowing Hudson Hills Homeowners Association use of town property for a monument sign.
Before you get started, Jen, I had a question. I might have a conflict of interest here because I'm on the actual board for the HOA.
It is entirely up to you. It is what's known as an organizational issue. You're
Mhm.
not getting any personal benefit, not necessarily a conflict.
Okay.
And just because he wasn't at a mic, the response was, you don't have a personal issue. It's an organizational, so it's not an actual conflict. For the record. Go ahead.
All right, so before you tonight is a resolution, for a sign agreement, which is a request from the Hudson Hills HOA, the Homeowners Association, to construct and maintain a sign that would be located on town property. It would actually be owned by the town. It would be maintained and constructed by the HOA. And it would identify the neighborhood as well as whatever the future programming of the site that it's on. So if we're standing right here in Town Hall, this site is literally right across the street. And the sign would be a monument sign, like I said, it would identify the neighborhood, but that property across the street has not been programmed yet. So the name of it is TBD, to be named, to be known at a future date. But in addition, in the agreement, you'll find there are exhibits not only for the sign location, but also the sign specifications. So if and when the town chose in the future a name for that site, there are specifications to then locate that name on the sign in the future at some later date. Let's see here. The agreement also reinforces the required permitting process. So we'll review it for consistency with the agreement itself, as well as the town's code, the sign code. And there'll be any building review associated with that as needed for foundations and other things to ensure that the monument sign is safe, and also associated in any associated inspections. So the sign, the agreement, the sign location exhibit, and the sign details exhibit are all in your packet. Let's see, it's really it's not a super detailed request, but if you have any questions, I am of course available for you.
So, I got a
Ryan, who's
question.
also the applicant, is also, I'm sorry,
What would be the purpose? Why?
to identify, so, this is like a neighborhood and site identification sign. So essentially, this would kind of be a gateway marker for when you're entering Hudson Hills. The sign itself is meant to serve as kind of an overall general identification sign for the neighborhood, but its function is to identify a future park or something else that will be located at that site in the future.
Not those for a park, or is it for people that live in Hudson Hills? To separate them from the rest of Hudson is what I'm looking at. That's what I kind of see.
Right. So it's for their neighborhood, and it's not uncommon for a subdivision to have some sort of kind of identification sign to say you've made it here. This is Hudson Hills versus another part of town, which there, if there is another subdivision that wanted to name itself like say, we have Mountain View, there's another, I think that's the trailer park down south. They have a little community. They have a monument sign for their neighborhood. So it's not uncommon for a neighborhood to sign itself. The reason why this is more looked at as a kind of a civic feature is because we're going to be able to use it in the future to put a park name or other name of that, whatever we program that property to do in the future, whether it be a park or passive open space or whatnot, we would be able to sign that space as well for that function. So people would know that they made it to that space as well.
And most neighborhoods that have HOA have signage. So it makes sense, since they're really kind of the only HOA property in Hudson, have a sign.
And it
You
is
know?
located at the entry to their development. So it really is, it's kind of more of a destination. You've made it here. That's what the whole purpose of the monument sign is.
Is it gonna say just Hudson Hills, or is it gonna have like the Covenant community under it, or HOA, whatever they use?
So for the short time, there will be nothing underneath it. It will just say
Okay.
Hudson Hills. But until the town comes up with programming for that site and comes up with a name for it, because we name, you've recently named a park. This would be somewhat of the same kind of process. And once that name is found and the programming for that site is figured out, that's when we could come back and put that name on that sign as well. So I don't want to say that it's not going to identify Hudson Hills. It's doing double duty. It's identifying the neighborhood, but also identifying the civic space in that neighborhood as well. Yeah, I don't want to pull the wool over your eyes. It's doing both things, but that's its
Well,
function.
and that's one thing I see is the separation. And that's kind of unfortunate.
Well, and I think it has to kind of be seen as separation because they are HOA. The town itself, the majority of the houses in Hudson are not HOA, and everybody knows that. But everybody knows Hudson Hills is an HOA. So I think, they're already separated as it is. It's just that's Hudson Hills. Everyone knows, because when I talk about Hudson, people are like, Hudson or Hudson Hills? And I'm like, no, town of Hudson, I don't know. That's how I see it, is they're already separated from Hudson anyway.
It's also a special tax district.
Right. So
It's also what?
A special tax district. I think it's like 60 mils more. 66.76 mils more to be exact.
yeah, so.
And it's
If
not.
the park is developed, will Hudson Village be able to go to?
Sorry?
I'm sorry?
I just had a question about that.
Go ahead.
If the HOA is gonna put up the sign and for future programming and whatnot, and at some point in the future, they decide to put like a pool or a special park or some kind of recreation in there, will that be designated for Hudson Hill residents only, or would that be for the use of everybody for the entire town of Hudson? That's just kind of how, because there is kind of a separation there between Hudson Hills and the town of Hudson. That's my question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I didn't catch your name, but I think I can quickly answer that question just based on property ownership. So right now the town owns that property. So if that is technically a public property for specific purposes that it was platted for, that I believe include open space and parkland and whatnot. So it's technically public property.
Everybody.
Yep. And so I don't know that the HOA couldn't come in and do anything to privatize it because the town owns it.
No.
So that's a really quick way to say it's based on ownership. They don't own the property, so they don't have the rights to it.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does anybody else on the council have any other questions on this?
I don't necessarily disagree with Joe, but I just think it's weird because it's the only subdivision currently. I think as we move forward, this will be.
It'll probably be commonplace. You see it in a lot of other big towns. There's an entry that has, some odd subdivision.
Right.
And the more that come in, they probably will start doing that. This just happens to be the first one that we've had come in to do so. Anybody else? If not, then I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve a resolution 2108. A resolution approving a license agreement allowing Hudson Hills Homeowners Association use of property for a monument sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6B, Colorado Department of Transportation request for an out-of-area sewer service.
I'm just going to stay here. So CDOT has requested sewer service at their maintenance facility. It is located, for the record, at 22305 I-76 Frontage Road. This is north of and just outside of our town limits. So technically not inside our town limits. They have to technically come ask for sewer service. So how this works is they would make a request before you for the service. This particular instance, it's sewer service. If you approve their request, then they can go and formalize with you via another resolution an agreement at a later date where they would go and design and understand the feasibility of kind of the path they think they're going to go with the line as it stands. And then after that, they get permits. So I just kind of want you to know umbrella-wise where we're at in the process. And this particular step is just very, very simply CDOT asking council for permission to get sewer service. So with that, the applicant is actually on the line as well. I believe her name is Teresa, and she's on the line as well if you have any questions. I will say they did kind of do an analysis to see where they think they can tie in. So there's an existing sewer line across 76 that runs in the frontage road behind Best Western and Loves. There's a frontage road kind of back there. There's a main line in there that they believe they can kind of get under 76 and connect to and pull down to their maintenance facility. But again, until they get the permission from council that it would allow them to get the sewer service, they haven't done design or anything to investigate the feasibility of that. But that's where they think they're headed. Okay. That is a very quick, brief explanation of the process. What we would need from you tonight is a motion to allow the sewer service. And there's not a resolution or anything associated with it. So I just want to kind of make sure you understand it's the very start of that process.
No cost? Or what?
No, this is all the burden of cost on the applicant.
Okay.
Right.
With them putting the service under I-76, would we then be able to hook up on this side of 76 for anything else that comes in along the frontage road that we annex in?
Technically, I think that there's an agreement that we would be required to enter into with CDOT, and I don't know what the technical term is. Hunter, I don't know if you know what it is. But essentially, it's like an access agreement. I don't think they have to do that for themselves, and I'm not sure that with a service line, that would be part of the deal, because I don't think it's in a main line extension. It's a service line extension. We can look into that, though.
Okay.
I'm just kind of gauging from what I remember from code and whatnot, kind of where the answer to that might lie, but we'll look into it.
All right. Any other questions for Jen or for the applicant? Okay, I would entertain a motion then.
I make a motion to approve the CDOT sewer line extension request to their maintenance facility located at 22305 I-76 Frontage Road.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to the next step. Okay, staff reports. Guy.
Thank you. Last meeting, we talked about enforcement of a single supplier of trash. We will have an ordinance for your consideration to council, at least by the March 17th meeting. We will have an enclave annexation report by that March 17th meeting. I have not processed the state small business grants yet. I've been dealing with DOLA to get our application in to get them to approve it to release funds. The way this is supposed to work is they're supposed to release funds to us, then we release them to the businesses based on an equation of what their prior revenue was. You know, if it's from 0 to 500,000, they get X amount. 500 to $1 million, they get Y amount. I'm waiting on doing that disbursement to make sure that we have the money in the bank before we start handing out money to businesses. It doesn't look like we're going to use the full amount that we've received. And again, the amounts are dictated by the policy, the grant policy. But we're getting closer to getting that money out. It's been a little frustrating. I did reach out to CDOT today to begin a discussion about the aesthetic design of the roundabouts specifically the one near Ben's Pizza. As we talked about, it's going to be a wide, flat roundabout. It's going to have a very wide, low apron. But we wanted something to indicate Hudson, whether it's kind of on the band of the middle part or in paving stones or something in the apron. So I wanted to start that discussion with them and then bring it back to you guys and get your input about what you would like. Again, we're trying to keep it low because the concept is they can go across the apron and kind of go just straight across with some of the larger loads. So we don't want them knocking stuff off. And I don't think we need an eagle on a tree and everything either. So I've reached out to them about that. And then just a reminder that your council class photos are after the meeting this evening.
Yeah, so don't leave right away.
Any
Charity.
questions?
Oh, anything else?
Thank you.
No, Charity. Corey.
Just one item. Guy and I are attending a meeting on Friday. As you might recall, in March, so about a year ago, we were meeting with Lochbuie and Keensburg about Lochbuie's desire to get out of the Hudson Public Library. And then COVID happened. But Lochbuie sent out an email earlier or last week, I believe, or the week before, saying they want to re-engage those conversations. So we are meeting on Friday to continue those conversations. And as you might recall, we left off with the idea that Lochbuie could take their portion of the taxes within their limits. And if they wanted to become a branch library, contribute those mills. That wasn't enough at the time, but that's where we left off, and we'll see where the conversations continue. But Lochbuie is still interested, apparently, in getting out of the public library.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else for Corey?
Yeah, is there any reason why the Hudson Library District can't just put a library in Lochbuie?
I think it's a question of how much revenue they have. I mean, that's ultimately the discussion. I think they have a library now work in Keensburg. I honestly don't know what the library board, what their long-term planning is on how to spend the money, but they certainly know Lochbuie wants a library.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Jen. Hunter. Jay.
Anybody have any questions? One thing I just wanted to bring up is because of the cold weather and stuff, watch your cars. Everybody watch your cars. The puffing thefts are way up. So we've gone from like 1,000 stolen cars in 2020 to 3,800 cars in Northern Colorado.
Oh,
Just
for
in
all of Northern
2021 already. So that's over 3,000 cars just stolen in 1 month. So the bad guys are out there, COVID, whatever you want to blame it on. Puffers up like 40 or 50% just in the last few weeks because of the cold weather. So we see a lot of it. We don't cite a lot of it just because we try to educate as much as we can, but people leave their cars running. I mean, it's not uncommon to see a truck running 20 minutes unattended. That's a long time to allow somebody to come borrow your truck, car, whatever. So that's one thing I would say to look at is the property crime is going to go up if you give them opportunities to do it. So try to just watch that stuff. And that the monthly stats have been posted, so they're online already. Anybody has any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. Michael. Sarah.
No, I met with Jay this week to discuss kind of what we can do with the community watch program. So I have some ideas, and so I'm looking forward to presenting that to you guys in March. So yeah, and I just want to thank the citizens that tuned in to the meeting. So keep doing it, please. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Maria.
We had our Rec and Events meeting, and we're going to be sending out flyers on events that are coming up. So
Anything else? Joe?
Nope, I'm good.
Candace? Daniel?
I'm all questioned out.
And I don't have anything else. Back to citizens' comments. Anybody wishing to address the council on anything that was already discussed during tonight's meeting may do so at this time. Are there any citizens who wish to address the council? Doesn't look like there's anybody who wishes to address the council. Therefore, meeting's adjourned at 7:30.